Good afternoon. My name's Emile Armour-Heselton, and I'm responsible for member relations and business development within the standardization sector of the ITU. Now, the ITU is the United Nations Specialized Agency for ICTs, but it's quite unique as a UN agency because in addition to our 193 member states, we also have 1,000 strong private sector membership as well. And this private sector membership really helps to drive the innovation and the standards that we develop. Now, all of these members come together to work in three key areas. One of them is radio communication, where members come together to allocate spectrum in satellite orbits. One is development, where these members come together to work on projects to help developing regions improve their telecoms infrastructure. And the third, and this is the arm that I'm from, is the ICT standardization sector, where all these members come together to develop global consensus-based standards across a range of different topics. So, for example, in speech and evaluation in vehicles, vehicular multimedia, V2X, automotive cybersecurity, and obviously generally connected and autonomous vehicles. So I'm going to be talking about some of the work we're doing on the autonomous vehicles. So
we also have panelists here.
Hi everyone. Is my voice good? Okay. Glad to be here. My name is Fan Yu. I'm the CTO of Bayanat. Bayanat is traditionally a geospatial mapping and survey company, spin-off from the Huzzati survey and mapping department. After the merger in 2014, we are evolving ourselves from a traditional mapping and survey company into a geospatial AI company. I was just reminded to join the team in Arabic, Bayanat stands for data. So data is in our DNA. We've been providing different data products, geospatial data, LiDAR.
yeah, so in 2019, we created a global focus group looking at autonomous and assisted driving. So this group, the main focus of the group was essentially to establish a global performance threshold for autonomous driving within the vehicle. And obviously there's a huge data component to that. So what we wanted to do was to bring together multi-stakeholders, so governments, industry, academia, some of the leaders in the industry to come together and look at what are the pre-standardization requirements that we need in order to develop the standards in this issue. So we looked at the ethical considerations, we looked at the privacy and data, so it was through reports, and we also looked at how we create these frameworks around these. So this was a pre-standardization group, and now we push the outcomes of those reports into our study groups to develop these standards now. So we have our industry members that are really leading this work within the sector, but we needed to do this pre-standardization study to really develop the landscape, look at what would be needed, and now the standards are being developed in our actual working groups.
So the members would cooperate as make a documents.
Yes, and as I mentioned, as a UN agency, we're quite unique because we have the governments and industry working together on this. So you can imagine if you're an industry member, you're able to have that conversation once with the various regulators. We also work closely with UNEC, WP1, to WP29 as well. But I think that multi-stakeholder approach is something.
Maybe I'll follow up with how they use something. Because I also love the geospatial locations. Traffic data is one super important component conjunction. And the other was, of course, navigation and all that data that you're talking about at the start. About how important that is. Sure. It doesn't.
Yeah. Of course, as I mentioned, right, I think data is the core part of the Intel ecosystem, and what I really want to highlight is even the roles that people are playing from academia, investors, regulators, the technology side. I was started, let's say, for academia or technology, but OEM. for their benefits, I think they really want to, let's say, more open or agile data policy so that the data can be used for the research study purpose, for the model training purpose, enhance the technology itself. But shifting on the other side, I consider myself as a consumer of the technology. My mindset completely changed. I'm very careful and concerned that my data might be misused by someone by share the data. And again, on the consumer, the data consumer side, there's something I've been telling myself. Okay, within a year, we have to admit that this is a highly disruptive era. Geopolitics, technology evolving, right? Not just mobility. We've seen, the large language model, how that's from, last year, before from OpenAI, and this year, how much application, how much of our day-to-day life, to a certain extent, it's not that much avoidable, right? You cannot, as long as you are using an iPhone, I think some of your data already shared whether, you like it or not. And as a human being, especially someone at the in tech, I think most of people in this event, just like me, want to always be the latest technology. Nobody wants to, falling behind, right? So on that front, I think really, the data at a personal level, be open-minded, tell ourselves, the data points. That's something, at least we can.
Yes, we do a lot. I mean, years ago, I remember writing that cars were becoming rolling computers, connected rolling computers that were basically persistent connection to the internet, constantly tracking where you're going. We have to mention the stories, the latest stories, at least in the United States, about automakers, OEMs, using that data and selling it to insurance companies. So they were clearinghouse to insurance companies, to a middleman, and then insurance rates were going up on people. Is that the proper use of their data? You've seen the user agreements. Nobody reads the user agreement, and that's sort of what happened in these cases. Those companies have changed. This happened before with GM. I wrote about them in 2017, and they changed their policy. Consumers are so upset. They said, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. So it is this new navigating this ethics landscape. And I sort of wonder where we think it's headed. Emile, I want to ask about different countries and their attitudes about it. Some countries are relaxed about some data and not so relaxed about others. And so maybe I'll just get down and see what your experiences between China and the US, for example. You're in San Jose, different dealing with the government there, I assume. With all these different players, stakeholders, must want things.
They do, but we have experience working on automotive standards that touch on data. For example, in our security group, we developed a standard on secure software updates, and we had some of the big manufacturers driving that. It's interesting you talked about insurers and the concern around that. So the pre-standards group that we established, one of the hypothetical situations we looked at was the Molly problem. So if you have a young girl, Molly, in the street and she's knocked over by an unoccupied level 5 SAE vehicle, how do you then manage the post-collision scenario? How is the data managed there? So this is one of the issues that we talk about. We look at how do you develop these frameworks? How do you develop that trust in order to develop standards that can be applicable globally?
That's one of the things. I won't mention the trolley problem or anything like that, which is attempted to do. But that is definitely one of those issues. Who has that data? There are black boxes in the U.S. could get the telematics data about who owns it, who's responsible for it. That's country to country, though, is what I wondered about. Because a few years ago, there was a telematics company, and they were talking to me about in France, they don't want to know your location. That's something that you can't know. In Germany, they don't care about the location. They don't want to know the drive. So if you've driven a car in those two countries, you may understand why. Is it that difficult, or are things coalescing around what they're going to accept?
I think there's still some differences in approach. If you look at the US as an example, look at California, they're quite far ahead in that sense. But we don't have that general standard across the board, and it's really, as a secretariat, we don't really comment on where countries are in this. We're trying to bring them together, countries and their industry, to see if we can work together to develop something that works for all.
And I would think, Quain, as a data person, as a research scientist as well, you see data that you would love to have to improve the safety, improve the accuracy of these systems. Are companies and governments pretty open to that right now?
Well, I think my voice still can be heard, right? I think this is better. I think the situation pretty much around the most part of the world, definitely I think you will understand this, much better than myself. There are a lot of, let's say, gray areas. Not that much already building in the legislation framework of certain countries. The boundaries are sometimes not that much clear. Okay, regarding how data can be shared, what type of data can be shared, what is, right? So, I think what we, developed, implemented in UAE, sort of like creating a sandbox. In fact, Yas Island and Saudi Island, pretty much the areas that the government worked with us. We're testing the technology using the both islands like a lab. Okay, this is like a broader area of a physical lab. I think it's a good starting point before things can be officially, launched. There are always, trying to learn, when especially coming to new technology. In addition to the aspects of the autonomous driving, right, I think there are much bigger discussion about AI with the large language model. I think that's essentially something behind the insurance or other data set. It's like, who will really be responsible for the result? Okay, so we've seen some of the success of generative models, but till now, most of the results generated by large language models are sort of like suggestions. Right, it's sort of like a chatbot. If you answer, you can choose as a human whether you take that suggested course of actions or not. So the choice is still with the human itself. But when it comes to autonomous driving domain, it's more about like a speculative part of the models that the machines are making the decisions. In 99% of the chance. The machine can, in general, trying to make the driver's partner in a safer manner. I think that's fine. But whenever there's an accident, or I've seen like an article. I'm not sure it's from New York Times or a different one. Say about one scenario. Okay, when the car was running at the certain speed. And for certain, it will be crashed, into an accident. And by that time, the algorithm need to make a decision whether to kill the driver himself or kill somebody else. So if that decision is with the machine, that's really a different level of ethical discussion, way beyond who will be paying for the car repair. So that's something that will be living outside this sandbox being created at the first place. Yeah, that matters.
Yeah, those decisions are, thankfully, according to physics, going to be incredibly rare, but they're really ones we still need to think about anyway, because we have to try to predict as much as we can. The changing part of our navigating new norms, I think, is really interesting too, because I think back and I wrote about I was driving a Corvette, I was test driving a Corvette and it had a recording feature in it. GM had just put it in, not signaling out GM, it just so happens, had a camera in the car, had a performance data recorder and recorded audio in the car, which is great, except I was exceeding the speed limit when all this recording was going on. And GM tried it for a while, and they took it out because they were nervous that some drivers would be upset with that recording. We weren't quite there yet. Now, fast forward to where we are now, we're putting cameras in cars. We have drowsy driver systems and cameras in cars, and it's become, you get in an Uber or Lyft, there's a camera pointed at you, that's what you expect. Our attitude's going to change as these cars come along. To Hugo's point, we want to make things safer. And people are just going to get more comfortable, and we won't be so concerned. Is that going to happen, or you think it's going to be a slow process?
Safety is going to be the thing that really pushes member states and stakeholders to help scale this technology. I think, don't quote me on this, but road deaths, the amount of road deaths a year surpassed the number of HIV, AIDS deaths, and tuberculosis deaths combined. So if you're looking at those figures, looking at the amount of road deaths that could potentially be avoided with better technology, better surveillance, then I think societies, governments will start to look at that. And maybe the perception will change around the technology.
One thing is, we talk a lot about transparency at the corporate side too, and trying to be transparent. I take it that the ITU, that's one hope too, that if you have standards we're all adhering to, then consumers know what's happening with that data or we're not happening with that data. I assume that's help adoption.
Yeah, so one of the benefits, if you're a company, Hugo's, and you're interested in influencing standards or following them, then you can be sure that if you're an ITU member, if they are approved, then they're essentially rubber stamped by all the governments in the world. So if you use them in your products, then it enables you to enter all of these markets. So really being involved in that is a sign of legitimacy. You benefit from this public-private UN network, and you're really at the forefront of standards development and understanding these issues.
And you get to see a lot of different companies and work with a lot now. So are you seeing a transition yet in some of those autonomous vehicles in terms of what they cover and what kind of data they collect?
Well, I think, first of all, building the AI task force itself, I think it's a topic itself. But I think that's something different companies been investing a lot, making, the consumers, the enterprise or, retail customers, basically ease their concern, right? The AI, they are building, the data they are collecting, is for the good, for the developing something, in a positive manner. Well, even without much of the visibility at this point, but I'm highly confident the technology will be evolving much faster than we can, we imagine. Also as a consequence, it's, the large language model. The most important thing is for the machines, it's sort of like establishing this, framework they can evolve by itself. We've seen, announcements. Right now there are AI developers, right? And we've seen Jason Huang, I think just a couple of months back in Dubai, announced that the next decade, like my children, I don't have to teach them how to do program. Because after the time they're, 20, 30 years old, nobody has to program. Right? I think, with all this evolvement and advancement, for sure, and it can only just program much faster than we can imagine.
I think that is true. Although I imagined it was going to be farther along now than it is, unfortunately. I really thought that, I'd be getting an autonomous vehicle and leasing it and not having to pay attention to the road. I'm still looking forward to that day. So we only have about a minute and a half left. I want to give each of you a chance to sort of make a closing pitch for a standard or join the club so I'll start with you, Hugo.
Well, I was just going to say, what you were saying earlier, you can actually do that already. You can go inside of an autonomous vehicle here in California, at least, China as well. So I think the future is actually already here. I think just kind of I was saying earlier.
In addition to our statutory events, meetings where we're talking about these issues, we also have bigger events where we invite non-members and other stakeholders to discuss. One of these is the AI for Good Global Summit, which will be taking place in May, at the end of May, so 30th, 31st in Geneva. And this summit basically convenes all stakeholders, experts, come together to identify practical applications of AI that can be leveraged to address some of the world's most pressing issues articulated by the SDGs. And road safety, AI for road safety will be one of the topics that we will cover. So we invite everybody in the audience and in yourselves to participate in that summit.
Yeah, first of all, I think the event is like a great start, right? And unfortunately, we don't see much audience left. I hope most of the people are busy trying the demos, outside. And for the remaining audience, I encourage you, if you haven't tried the vehicles, robo taxis or minibuses, it's definitely worth, trying it. And my closing remark would be that everybody, no matter what role or capacity that you have, should be like more open-minded with the faster, evolving, disruptive, technology. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. And again, it is an incredibly exciting time. It's just taken a little longer than we thought, but obviously it's spreading around the world with DriftX, the first one here in Abu Dhabi. And I hope everybody enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much for attending.